And we are live. Hello, guys, and welcome to this live stream. I've got two very special guests on here. You all probably know Renaldo Gouws. He's the one that we've been discussing for a week now. Sorry, I just forgot to put off the sound there. Okay, so we talked about how we're going to debate for the last week and so. And actually, just to give you some background, what happened was one of my patrons actually asked me to debate him, and he agreed. So welcome on the show, Renaldo.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I think this is something new for me to do live. So I'm very happy to be on here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Great. And then the other guest I have is Conscious Caracal, or just Caracal. He will be on here just to sort of regulate the time, and so that we don't just drag on for hours and hours, because I've put out a schedule. Just fast, the schedule will be 10 minutes for me to talk, then 10 minutes for Renaldo to talk, and then there's an open discussion where we each will ask the other one 3 questions, and we will allocate 5 minutes to each question. And that is also where you guys can be involved in the conversation. You can ask questions, and so just remember to tag Conscious Caracal whenever you want to ask a question, because he is going to give us the important or the good questions through, because we won't be able to follow everything in the chat. So remember to tag Conscious Caracal. The other thing is, you guys have been pressuring me to get Instagram, and you guys know my opinion on Instagram. But in any case, I decided it was a good medium to market my show with. So there's a link in the description. What I basically said, for the guys that weren't on my last live stream, is I believe that Instagram is a tool that people use because they crave attention, and it's actually breaking down the moral values of young girls in our society, because the more revealing they are on Instagram, the more likes they get, and the more likes they get, the more rewarding it is for them. So it just makes them post more and more revealing pics on Instagram. But that's just my opinion. Or what do you think, Renaldo?
Well, I mean, I've got a little bit of a different viewpoint on it. I see Instagram as a medium that can be used, obviously, for good and bad. I do think that people that are obsessed with attention tend to flock just as much as people that like to get their message out there. So obviously, I don't know. It could be said the same thing about YouTube. I mean, I've just briefly
Yes.
looked at some of the comments here, and I've already seen that I'm called the worst names under the sun. So, and I mean, obviously, it's the person's opinion. So some use Instagram for good, others use Instagram for bad. I think it's the same for any social media platform out there.
Just before we start with the debate on the comments, you pointed out that there are some bad comments in my live streams. Now, as a paleo-libertarian, I am a free speech absolutist, so I believe you can say whatever you want there, but just like, be nice, guys. Don't say anything that would
Can I jump
be
in there?
insulting or anything.
Can I jump in? I would honestly say that let the people comment whatever they want to. With all due respect, I mean, I've got a very thick skin. I am a politician, so I really honestly don't care what somebody behind a secret username calls me. So we can go ahead with that. It's fine.
Yeah, but I will be watching the chat just to make sure there's not anyone stepping over too far a boundary.
Okay.
All right. I believe we can start with the debate. Aaron Caracal, you can start the time now.
Right.
Okay, so what I want to start with is just telling you guys a little bit about myself. So I am Willem, and this is now my channel. Those of you who have been following my channel will sort of know my points, but I think I have to put some perspective to you for what exactly my political stance is. And I would call myself a paleo-libertarian, or true libertarian, or old school libertarian is the terms that's used. What that basically means is I believe in the absolute minimum of government. Now, that means that I believe the individual should be free, but the government should just be there to ensure the freedom of the individual. And the only way that the government will do that is by having a force, a police force or an army, or maybe one force that's combined between the two to protect the individual. And for the rest, I believe there should be nothing that's state run, like no state hospitals, no state schools, nothing like that, because state schools are just a medium of indoctrination, and state hospitals is just a medium to make the people um, dependent on the state. So that's it. Now, this debate will be on farm murders in the first place, and then in the second place on what the Afrikaners' political stance here in South Africa is as a minority. Now, by farm murders, I want to start by saying it is really a massive problem that we have. And I'm going to use the Transvaal Agricultural Union statistics because they are the most conservative statistics out there. AfriForum statistics is a little bit more liberal, like they would use some other murders that happened as a farm murder and so forth. But the Transvaal Agricultural Union statistics is only something is only seen as a farm murder if it happened on a farm, if it is a farmer that was murdered, and if they have the proof, the police documents and the death certificates. So you know that their statistics are well done. Now, I've seen a lot of comments by people like Elmine du Plessis. We all know what she did, like trying to disprove how bad farm murders is and telling people it's only normal crime, with which I completely disagree. I can't tell you how much I disagree with that. I mean, there were 59 farmers, white farmers, killed last year. Now, this is important that we know that this is just the white farmers. Then 2 black people were murdered, and then the rest of the 74 that you've been hearing about was visitors and stuff like that. So now, if you want to look at the proportionality of that, that's 59 white farmers out of a total of, we know the last census was just over 32,000 farmers in South Africa. Now, that means you can roughly multiply 59 by 3 to get the murder rate in that year, which is absolutely skyrocketing the national average of just over 30 murders per 100,000. And now people say, no, yeah, it's just like the same as all normal crime, or it's just happening in rural areas and so forth. I completely disagree with that. And that's the one thing that I want to say in this debate. And then the other thing is, I want to talk about the cultural and political stance in the mind of the Afrikaner. Now, people are always saying that AfriForum, who went overseas and went to talk about these farmers and the expropriation of land without compensation, is this fringe far-right organization. But I completely disagree with that, because AfriForum is part of the Solidarity movement. Now, the Solidarity movement have just over 400,000 members right now, and they are pushing for 500,000. And in South Africa, there's about 2.7 million Afrikaners. And I just spoke to Ernst Roots on the phone before this debate. He told me that more than 90% of their members are Afrikaners. So in that 2.7 million Afrikaners that there are in South Africa, there is around about 600,000 households. Now, most Afrikaner households are single income households. That's just the culture that we have. And usually when someone becomes a member of an organization like Solidariteit or the Solidarity movement, it will just be one member of the family that will become a member for the family. So this puts it into perspective for you that we can safely say that more than 2/3 of Afrikaner households are in some way affiliated with the Solidarity movement. Then also, we all know the very right-wing people who always criticize AfriForum and Solidarity for being sellouts. So we've seen it on Twitter just today, people giving Ernst Roots trouble from punching him from the right, and then he says, yeah, but right-wing people call us sellouts, and then you guys call us fringe far right. So, and then of course we have the liberals in the media attacking them. But just to show you how insignificant the attacks the media had on them was, if you look at what Kali Kriel said when he said that apartheid was not a crime against humanity, and the media totally blew that out of proportion, and they said he's saying that apartheid was the best thing ever, and he says apartheid was a lot better than we had now, and a lot of things that he never said. Like, there was a massive reaction from this small group of people in the media, I would say in the single numbers of activists and journalists, or, well, in South Africa, those are the same thing. But in any case, and the people who, like the Solidarity movement, haven't lost any members over that. Like there was no outrage from their members. So it just shows you how the broader Afrikaner doesn't care anymore about what the liberal media says about him. They support AfriForum, they support the solidarity movement, and what Kali has said, they go with it, and I think most agree with it. Because the reason I'm going to talk about what Kali said, he said that apartheid was only declared a crime against humanity by the old communist countries and Sweden, none other. All the other countries said, no, we can't do that because we know the facts that there were 518 people killed during apartheid. And that's just a joke to compare that to something like 6 million people being killed during the Second World War, or more than 100 million people being killed by someone like Chairman Mao in China, which is actually a crime against humanity. And it was just these the same countries that supported the ideology that killed more than 100 million people were the only countries who said that apartheid was a crime against humanity. Now, nobody is saying apartheid was good or apartheid was better than it is now. Nobody is saying that we need to bring back apartheid. All that we are saying is that politicians are using apartheid just like they are using the same thing like white privilege and white monopoly capital and all these stuff overseas. They are using it as a political tool to get more people to vote for them, and then they spread absolute lies. I mean, I've seen people saying that there were millions of people killed by the whites during apartheid. I've seen things like, yeah, and the whites enslaved them and lynched them, which is absolutely a lie, because no black African has ever been enslaved in South Africa. Yes, there were slaves in the very, very early times, but they were all Malay. And South Africa actually abolished slavery under Dutch rule more than 150 years before Abraham Lincoln did in America. And during that time, there weren't any black people in the Cape Colony. We know about the Khoi. They were definitely there. I'm actually having a very nice conversation with a guy from Gatvels, Capetonian. And they are actually saying that the same. They are tired of these black people claiming it's their land because they were never there. We know from history books that the entire Free State, there were nothing there. We know that when the Land Act of 1912 was established, black people only occupied 9% of the land, and then 13% of the land were given to them. And now they're saying, no, this is them getting, the people stole their land there. And actually, they got 4% more land than they actually had in the beginning. And also, another example that I can name was the example of the Verwoerd. He said they can only go to school until grade 4, which is a lie. He said they have to go to school at least until grade 4, because before the Bantu Education Act, there were no education for black people. So all these schools were actually built by white taxpayers. I know from a source. Paul Creer was the guy who wrote the book about the Bantu education system. The white people, or the Afrikaners of South Africa specifically, paid more than 2 trillion rands in South Africa's rand value to build schools and universities for black people. And now the black politicians say that they were deprived of it. So that's the argument that we have there. My time is almost up, so I'm going to wrap this up. I'm just going to say there's a culture shift in the Afrikaner that we see what's happening to us in indefinite racial attacks, because we know that AfriForum's got the statistics. Out of the 8,000 farm attacks that happened, there was not one single farm attacker that was not a black African male. There was one case where one of the people involved was an Indian man. But for the rest, and that's not demographics, because if it was demographics, it would have been 70% black, but it's 100% black. And the torture and everything involved, we will talk about it later in this debate. It just is another proof that we can take that it is definitely racial, for people saying we hate white people and torturing them to death and stuff like that. But in any case, to you, Renaldo.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, it's always good to sort of hear the background, because I mean, as much as I've researched you, I don't really know sort of what your beliefs are. So I'll just move over to who and what I am. Look, I'm not a big fan of isms, meaning having to describe yourself. But if I had to forcefully describe myself, I'd probably call myself a centrist leaning towards the left. And to put that into uh, an ism, I would probably say that I am a liberal egalitarian. Now, in essence, what that means is that we believe that everybody should have a right to live their life, to be who they want to be, but also to consider the fact of Ubuntu. Or consider the fact that there are basic rights that need to be looked after, and that is what I base my life on. There's a bunch of people that assume that because I'm a centrist leaning to the left, this means that I am anti-white, or against Afrikaners, or against anything that has to do with being white, which is it's absolutely untrue. The simple fact of the matter is that I believe in liberties on both sides. So with respect to Julius Malema, as an example, in my opinion, Julius Malema is an absolute idiot. Julius Malema is a poison to this country. Then on the other end of the spectrum, somebody like the Front National, who believes that they are superior in every single way. That is the other side of the group. So as a centrist, I don't condone the actions of either side. Now, with regards to, let's talk about farm murders. The reason that we are here is to talk about farm murders and Afrikaners. Now, for those of you that don't know, ek is Afrikaans, ek is Afrikaner. My surname is Gouws, and you can trace that back directly to the French Huguenots, that landed in the Cape. So, and then it was called Gos. So I understand that my history is there, and to an extent, I look at that and I'm proud of how far we've come in the African continent, especially South Africa. But with regards to farm murders, it's not that I don't understand that farm murders are happening, or that I'm saying that it's not taking place. Farm murders are taking place. The statistics are there for everybody to see. Farm murders are taking place. The issue that I have is that in this country today, we've got 54 murders a day, every single day in this country, right? Why are we allowing people to speak on behalf of only a certain amount of those individuals? When you look at the stats, you mentioned the statistics earlier. I've got this statistics from AfriForum Research Institute that says in 2016, 2017, there were 74 murders that took place the entire year. Now, I'm not saying that 74 murders isn't bad. May those people rest in peace and their families find peace. What I'm saying is, in that same year, in total, in South Africa, 18,980 murders took place. So let's call it 19,000 murders took place. Why are we only talking about 74 murders? Why are we only going overseas and talking about 74 of those murders when there are 19,000 murders in this country? That is the issue that I have. And that is something that if you look basically at the numbers, 74 versus 19,000. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that those 74 add up to the 19,000. But the fact of the matter is, if you have people that go overseas to speak on behalf of an ethnicity, why don't those same people go and speak on behalf of the country? Why is it needed to go and speak on behalf of farmers alone when you can in actual fact speak on all South Africans? There's also this misconception that, AfriForum is the only one that is standing up for farm murders. That's not true. There are other political parties that are speaking out against farm murders. You just need to do a Google search. But a lot of people are lazy and they don't want to do that. So they fall into that narrative, or they fall for the trap that only one political organization are fighting and only one civil rights movement is fighting for that, which is simply not true. Here's a tip. Google Annette Stein and you'll find your answer. Google farm murders, Annette Stein, and you'll get a lot of research there. So it's also no secret that I am part of a political party, the Democratic Alliance. I do not speak on behalf of them. My YouTube videos are my own view, and that is the view of being a liberal egalitarian, a centrist leaning towards the left. So there's also, I'll leave the farm murders there for you and me to have a debate later on. But the one thing that I do want to get back to is the media. It's no secret I'm not a fan of the media. The media definitely is, in my opinion, leaning towards social justice, being social justice warriors. I've been a victim of that. There's been a couple of articles written about me when I had a feud with a black YouTuber, and it was portrayed as if I was attacking him because he was black. So honestly, I agree with you that the media is definitely, I think, social justice warriors. Not every single media outlet out there. I also know that you said that you think the Huffington Post is the most centrist news organization. I don't agree with that. The Huffington Post is clearly very, very left-leaning. I would say News 24, Media 24, in my opinion, but specifically News 24 is more centrist. And then you've got your news outlets on either side that's reporting on it. With regards to what you said about apartheid, yes, I did read and listen to what Kali Kriel had to say. I think obviously using Eusebius Mackenzie as a measuring stick to believe on or to find out rather what was true or not is very warped, because Eusebius Mackenzie is definitely biased and not somebody that I support. I had a conversation with him, or not rather, I had an opinion, I gave it, and he blocked me immediately off of Twitter. Which is pretty much what Steve Hofmeyr also did. So, as a centrist, you've got people on the right that block you because they don't want to debate with you, and you get people to the left that don't want to debate with you. So as a centrist, you find yourself in a difficult position where white people are criticizing you for being a farrier or being a cuck, the C-U-C-K. And on the right, you've got, or rather on the left, you've got some black people that criticize you for being white and being a colonist and stuff like that. So, and I mean, I'm very comfortable in the center. I'm very comfortable to be criticized from both sides, because morally I know what I believe in, and I report on that. To get back to the point of what Kali Kriel said, there's nothing. I think you walk a very dangerous path if you try and even discuss apartheid in any way in a positive light. And I mean that in the sense of trying to excuse the atrocities that happened under apartheid. Now, remember that you do not have to have high murder statistics in order to call it a crime against humanity. Being oppressed for 45 years, I think, is a good enough reason to be considered a crime against humanity. Oppressing millions of black people for over 45 years. The education system that white people paid for, as you mentioned, was an absolute joke. Saying that we built a couple of schools, but we force you to be taught in Afrikaans is not really a solution. Imagine if the university that you were at right now said, sorry, English is scrapped, Xhosa or Zulu is the official language, and you'll have to pass with that language. I'm sure that you'll have a problem with that. So it's pretty much the same thing as trying to excuse anything in apartheid. Apartheid was atrocious. Everything about apartheid, the way that it was institutionalized, the way that it was thought out, there's no way that you can in any way, shape, or form try and belittle, or I mean rather take away from apartheid and say it wasn't that bad, because it's very easy for a white individual to say that when millions of black people still live the legacy of apartheid today. And that is a thing that a lot of people don't understand and comprehend, is that a lot of people think when 1994 happened, suddenly, overwhelming majority of black people suddenly became middle class, that they still weren't living in the conditions they were living in, that they weren't poor, that they didn't have an education, that their parents had minimum wage jobs. So people like to say it's been 20 odd years since apartheid ended. Why can't people get over it? Well, it's because of 3 generations of oppression. It's not going to be fixed in 1 or 2 generations, unfortunately. I don't know how much time I've got left. Okay, well, I think I should also wrap it up. So, yeah, I think I dealt with some of the issues that you raised, but yeah, that's pretty much what I've got to say so far in this debate.
All right, Renaldo, I've got a question for you. You keep referring to yourself as the centrist, but where do you then draw the line of the center? Because as I told you, the solidarity movement, which you see as far to the right of you, is already more than the majority of the people here, and there are about 100,000 people, or we can say households, in organizations like the AWB, the Commando Corps, the Eystergarde, all of these very right-wing organizations that we can say is right of AfriForum, and then it says about 100,000 people to the left of Solidarity, who is also not members of the Solidarity movement, which we basically can say is the movement speaking for Afrikaners, just by pure numbers. Obviously, you are in that group on the left of the Solidarity movement, that 15%. How can you still describe yourself as a centrist then?
Well, I mean, it's quite easy. Like I said in the beginning, I hate the isms because I don't think that everybody is entirely one thing at 100% of the time. But to bring that into question, you say that, you know, it's easy to refer to something more to the right and say, well, we're not as right as that. Doesn't change the fact that you are to the right or to the left. I am a centrist based, the way that I can describe it, if you look at my YouTube channels, when it comes to racism, I report on racism, whether it's a black individual acting a racist way, or whether it is a white person acting a racist way. I am yet to still hear anything from Solidarity coming out where they speak out against something that a white individual committed. The fact that Ernst and Afriforum decided to go to the United States and speak on one specific topic that relates to white people clearly illustrates that, you know, it's something that is leaning towards the right. So I can't be wrong in saying that Afriforum is right. I mean, I'm surely you can also admit that, you know, being in solidarity and considering yourself, somebody that wants to fight for the rights of your ethnicity alone can honestly be considered as being as conservatively right.
All right, I think it is always needed for every minority worldwide to have a movement fighting for them, because they can't just lay back and let people tell them we are going to come and kill you, we are going to take your land, we are going to do that, etc., etc. We can't live here and have people telling us that there is this fictional system of white oppression still, and white what was that term my money used? White privilege and everything, because that simply doesn't exist. It's simply not true. I've actually watched Jordan Peterson talk on this, and where he completely debunks it. He uses the example of the what's that in English? Sorry, I just need to think about it quickly. But anyway, that crustaceans on the sea bottom, they also have a brain that uses serotonin in their nervous system, and they also have a hierarchical structure like we do. And you as a psychologist will know that when someone is higher up in the structure of society, he does perpetuate that towards other people by the way he acts. And there is just a structural, it's just biological as it is. And just because we have proof that in some groups of people tend to be higher up in that structure than they are in other groups of people, like for example the system in Switzerland, which we have to discuss also tonight, the German Swiss people always or have a much higher average income than the French Swiss people or the Italian Swiss people or Romanish Swiss people. And that's just how it is. Does that mean that the German Swiss people is oppressing everyone else? No, of course not. That would just be a lie to say it. How can we say that white people then oppress other people just because white people have more money? That's like Hitler saying the Jews were oppressing them in Germany just because the Jews had more money than the Germans had. It's completely ridiculous. That's not the reason why.
Okay, so first off, you know, the same media that you are talking about that is twisting words and putting words in people's mouths is obviously doing exactly the same thing on the other side. You know, when you talk about, and it points back to the fact that I'm a centrist. When something takes place that I don't agree with fundamentally, for instance, Kali Kriel being taken out of context, then I will make it let known. If something happens where on the other side where something is out of context, then I do exactly the same thing. You can't have this double standard of agreeing with the media when it suits your agenda, but then when the media attacks you, then to bring out the fact that the media is biased. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. The point that I'm trying to make is, for instance, the way that Musi Maimane was used out of context by saying that he was a mini Mandela, which obviously the media had to go and apologize for afterwards, because they didn't complete the whole sentence as to why he said it. He didn't use it as a compliment. He used it as people insulting him. And the same happened with Kali Krill as an example. So it's very easy to sit there and go, yeah, but the media is this and that. And unfortunately, this is the case. Yeah, you have to consider everything. And with that being said, the easiest way to say it, like I said in the beginning, is farm murders are taking place, right? So farm murders is something that needs to be dealt with, but it's not something that needs to be dealt with only. It's something that needs to be dealt with constructively with the problem that we have in this country, which is we have a crime problem. We have an ANC problem. We have an EFF problem. Our government is currently the problem. The problem isn't black people. The problem isn't white people. The problem is that small minority on either sides that are trying to speak on behalf of everybody else, trying to make the people that just want to get along and live their lives together, they're trying to get those people to stay silent while the minorities on either side are attacking one another and trying to speak on behalf of everybody else.
Okay. Right. Renaldo, do you have a question for Willem? It's now your turn.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, my question would be, Willem, what political ideology do you most align with? And if I may ask, what political party do you support? I think it's obvious. I've made it clear who I'm a part of. So I would just like to know sort of what person I'm dealing with regards to having the debate.
All right. So as I said in the beginning, I am a paleo-libertarian, and unfortunately, there is no party for me in South Africa. I could not get myself as a Christian to vote for the DA, but that's not what this is about. So I can't vote for them because of their anti-Christian policies. But as I said, that's not what this debate is about. So there's no political party in South Africa that I support. If I could support one, I would have been, like in the American politics, I would have supported the Rand Paul wing of the Republican Party. So that is my political opinion. I believe that the individual should have all the freedom. I believe taxation is theft. And that's also what I want to be the goal to implement here in South Africa, is a libertarian system like the canton system in Switzerland. Switzerland has been the most right-wing country in Europe for the last almost 1,000 years, since they had the Council of Eight, where the canton system was implemented. And what that basically says is that these different cantons, which are divided by their ethnicities, like the German Swiss, the French Swiss, the Roman Swiss, the Italian Swiss, they pay taxes, and their taxes go to the people that they elect. So I believe that would be fair here in South Africa if the Afrikaner could vote for libertarianism and not pay taxes because he does not want to pay taxes to people who doesn't deliver anything to him. And if the Xhosa or the Zulu, which can be a canton, or the Sotho or whoever want to vote for communism, then they're welcome to do it, and they're welcome to tax themselves out of existence. We all know that that doesn't work. It failed everywhere else in the world. But just give us also the freedom to decide what we do with our own money, like the canton system in Switzerland. So,
okay, but can I get in there? Can I ask you to clarify what you mean with us?
I would say we would be defined as a canton, we the Afrikaner. So
but I'm an Afrikaner.
The Anglo would also be classified as a canton, just like it's in Switzerland, there are different cantons. And then all the other peoples will also be cantons on their own. And that's the only way that I can say we can fairly do it, because there are clearly fundamental differences between us that makes it so that some people are oppressing others through taxation in South Africa at this moment, because we pay, I think the last statistic said the white people in South Africa pay about 70% of the taxes. And that's not fair that we make a small fringe minority of politicians rich by paying so much taxes.
Okay, so to just try and understand what you're saying, because when you said us, you said the Afrikaner, and I'm an Afrikaner, and I don't believe in that system. There are these little hot facts that people like to throw out. For instance, who's paying majority of tax in South Africa? My question is, that VAT also contributes to that, and how much VAT is being paid by 56 million people. Then we can break it down according to race. And VAT being 15% per item, how much does that bring in versus how much the tax bring in? Another convenient statistic that people like to use with regards to farm murders is obviously the per capita. It's convenient to say there's only 200,000 farmers when you have to actually consider, according to Statistics South Africa, that there are 2.3 million households that live on agricultural land. Out of that, 11 million, the number that they've come to is 11 million people. If you then take that per capita murder that goes down from whatever amount it is to 0.4% per 100,000 or 0.4 murders per 100,000. So these are these hot statistics that people like to use, but they don't actually have the research behind it. It's easy to go and say, well, Statistics South Africa isn't accurate whenever it suits your agenda. And I'm not saying you saying this, I'm just trying to use these little facts of tax and all these things, when in actual fact, it's not even close to the truth. And people leave out inconvenient things. Like, for instance, everybody in this country pays VAT. Do we have a tax problem in this country? Yes, I do think that a lot of people are taxed into poverty. But with that being said, I do believe that, we can't just say tax is the only way that people contribute into this country.
Of course not, but tell me one thing, if there are 11 million people living on rural lands, and we have the statistics that out of those 11 million people, 32,000 of them are white tax-paying farmers, and out of those white tax-paying farmers in the all farm murder statistics, 59 people were killed. So out of the other 11 million that you talked about, we have the statistics that 2 black people were killed. So how does that add up then?
Right, Renaldo, you can answer that question, and then it's Willem's turn again to ask. So just
okay, not a problem. You see, this is what I'm referring to. So what you're doing now is you're narrowing everything down to the point of basically saying that it's farmers that are here, that are there. Well, my argument then in that case is if you had to take the per capita statistics of people with a doctor's degree that are farmers, how many per capita is that going to be? Or doctors with blue eyes that are farmers? I mean, you can twist the statistics to such a point that it can fit your narrative. I mean, it's just one of those things. But in your argument, you're mentioning the how many ever murders you mentioned, but then conveniently we're leaving out the 19,000 murders that took place last year in this country. Why? Why are we only talking about less than 100? But we ignoring the 19,000 that took place? That's the only point that I have. I'm not saying let's not talk about farm murders. I think the reason farm murders happen is because, unfortunately, they're easy targets. It's people that live far away from each other. It's assumed that farmers have money. It's assumed that, you can go in there, 5 or 6 people, and attack them and get access, and that's the way it takes place. So, we can all go about, why it's taking place. And it is a problem. Like I said, there are many political parties that are talking on this topic that AfriForum will not acknowledge us talking about it, because then they sort of lose their initiative and the reason that so many people support them. Anyway, sorry, you can ask your question.
Okay, I'll actually ask a question on that 19,000 of you. We know that the South African police statistics does not include race in the total of those murders. But what we do know is in other countries where it is used, like in America, for example, like if I can quote the FBI statistics, black people are just over 30% more likely to aggravated assault or murder a white person than vice versa. But actually, black people just make up 1/10 of the population there. So if you extrapolate the data and proportionately presented, then you know that black people are 200 times more likely to kill a white person, a black individual, than a white individual is to murder a black person. Now, in South Africa, we know the government conveniently doesn't include that statistics, but what we do know is all these township murders and stuff that we talk about that consist of that 19,000. In every single case, we know that what they do in the statistics is they say they have a statistic that say, okay, this was a family member that killed another family member, or a friend or a person who knows each other that killed them, or it was gang related, or they say something like that. So if you take away all of the gang related murders and the murders of people that knew each other and so forth, then you get a statistic of less than 1,000 murders that take place all over the country by people that do not know each other. Now, in the farm murders, the murderer almost never knows the white person. that he kills, he almost always has a racist remark to say, like, for instance, in my own family, my great uncle that was and my great aunt that was murdered, he took their blood and he wrote all over the walls 666 white devil and stuff like that. And then the police went after the court case and then they filed it. No, this was an attempted robbery. So we know their statistics are completely skewed. Another example that I can talk about is Willem Potgieter, the woman the little girl, she was 2 or 3 years old, whose dad was stabbed more than 150 times with a garden fork. Her mom was raped and cut open before her, and they actually took her and let her lie in the blood of her father and dragged her through the blood and let her walk so that a little footprints in blood can be on the floor. And they shot her. And then on the farm's gate, they said, "We took the whites out. We're coming for the others next." Now, that was also documented by the police as a robbery. Now, if we know that this is the case out of our own personal experience, like myself, and out of all these stories that we hear, I can go on tell horror stories for 3 hours now of things that happened. If we know this is the case, how can we even compare the two, the 19,000 that you talk about and the less than 100 that happened, if they clearly are not the same? The one is a terror attack, a definite hate crime. The other one is a person that got angry at his brother and shot him in the township. How do you compare those two?
I have to say that I'm quite shocked that you would assume that it is only the black on white crime that is brutal and that there's torturing taking place.
Okay, can you name one example of a white on black crime? Just one example where there was, well, any black on white crime except the Waterkloof 4.
But why is the Waterkloof 4 excluded? Because I mean, if I wanted to use that
because
example,
that's the only one, the only example that there's possible to use where there's actually
you're putting words in my mouth now. I mean,
one
with all due
versus more
respect,
than 1,000.
But I mean, it's like saying oh, you know, name one. Oh, but you can't name those one or that one, or you can't use another one.
Okay, then name
you
two.
Can't use another one.
Well, name two, the Waterkloof 4 and.
But wait now, I mean, I was still making my point. My point is you've mentioned 2 instances, and listen, with all due respect, I'm sorry to hear about your family, you know, the way and what happened, and may they rest in peace. With that being said, you've used 2 examples, and obviously I haven't gone through the 19,000 murders that took place last year, but why would you assume that, you know, a murder against a black individual wasn't also brutal? Because you're trying to say that, you know, the criminal that acted the way he did in this case was worse than another criminal. Anybody that committed a murder is bad. I mean, why are we adding the color of their race, or why are we adding their race to this equation? A crime is a crime. A criminal is a criminal. If you murder somebody, it's the ultimate crime. You can't sit there and go like, you know, well, there's 2 examples, or these 74 murders is more important because some of them were brutal. How do you not know that the others were more brutal? That's the question that I've got toward, you know, for you in this instance. Do you know that? Have you gone through the statistics?
Yes, I actually have gone through the statistics, and I know that. Well, let's just answer my question. Just name one example so that I can analyze it. Just name one example other than the Waterkloof 4, because I already named that now. Just name one example and tell me where it happened, where something like this happened, where 5 white men went into a house, if I can take another example, and they nailed the black baby to the table, 4-year-old black kid to the table, and took turns in raping them to death, and then afterwards cut open their parents until their parents died and raped the mother as well. Just one example of something just a little bit similar to that. Can you just name one, please, so that I can I can analyze that?
Okay, but then you're assuming that I'm looking for race in the crimes that are being committed. I honestly, like, obviously, I can't give you an example because I have actually, the thing with me is that I don't go and look for that. I mean, I'm sure that I'll be able to find you one if I actually have to go and Google it. The problem is that I don't focus on that when an actual fact takes place. What I'm concerned about is the statistics that take place in total. Are you not trying to tell me that black people in this country are more prone to being a criminal than a white individual? Is that what you're
Definitely.
trying to?
Definitely, like all the statistics shows us that. Like for example, on just on farms we had more than 8,000 attacks, black on white attacks, and in that same period of time, AfriForum have got these statistics. In that same time, just like attacks, like something like someone that gave a club to a worker or something, white on black incidents, there were 16 incidents. Okay,
I'm
so
I'm I'm
16
completely
versus
shocked, if I'm honest
8,000.
with you. I'm
Six,
completely
there
shocked
were
with that
in total
statistic.
16 incidents. In the same time, there were more than 8,000 farm attacks. So now you've got 16 incidents. It is documented. I don't want to sound like an advertisement for Ernst Rutz's book, but go and read it. It's in that book. He's got the proof in there. 16 incidents versus 8,000. Now that means for every 500 farm attacks, black on white, there's one white guy that assaults his black farm worker or do something similar like the coffin case. That's the statistics that we do have. So if you still say that there's no statistics that say a black person is more prone to crime than a white person, then you just don't look at the statistics.
No,
It's
in
just the
actual
same as
fact,
in
I do. But
America.
now, conveniently, it's easy to leave out the population sizes because, I mean, are you basing this judgment on the fact that there are 4.5 million white people in this country? So, when you've got 4.5 million white people living in this country versus, let's say, 38 million black people, are you honestly, or 40 million black people, are you honestly going to tell me that you don't expect the crime statistics to reflect the demographics of this country?
Okay, let's make it 45 million black people then, because then it's a very easy mathematical, very, very easy mathematics. It makes it 50 times more likely for a black person to be in a farm attack than a white person doing vice versa. And it's almost the same as in America, where a black person is 38 times more likely to commit crime, a violent crime against a white person than vice versa. So it's almost the same in the statistics.
Yeah, but then you're working on the statistics of the fact that there's only how many farmers? 230,000 farmers, or what is the statistics that you use per capita
Okay,
that
so
makes the number increase?
if you take the number of 32,000, then it will flip around, because then the black population is a much higher than the white population. But we can we can talk about this for days, but the fact is it just doesn't happen. Black on or white on black crime it's just something that is so small. Like if it happens, the media absolutely explodes and they report on it, like the coffin case 320 times versus the total farm murders. In total, there were 438 farm murders, which they reported on a total of 230 times. So
Okay,
we
but
know if every single white on black incident in this country, because the media absolutely explodes every time it happens. But the amount of white on black incidents in this country is so small that it is statistically insignificant
but
versus black on white crimes, which is rife as can come.
okay, so are we looking at the crime statistics just based on the last 10 years, or are we going to actually go back until the point where, are we going to when are we starting history here? That's the question that I have. So are we starting the history since 1994, or are we going to start the history before then? Because, you have to understand, I mean, especially as a psychologist, somebody, when you look at the history of this country, you also have to understand what has transpired in order to get to where we are now. Who are the people that are most likely to commit a crime? People that are poor. Who is more likely to commit a crime? Somebody that's uneducated, and specifically a serious crime. Why do we have so many people that are uneducated and poor in this country? Why are we leaving out that part of the history? I'm not justifying a crime taking place. I'm asking, why are we conveniently leaving those statistics out of it?
Because it isn't the whole argument behind the apartheid thing is that it wasn't our fault that black people are not educated. Like as I said, we built those
What?
schools for them.
What?
Like literally, if we spend more than 2 trillion rands building schools for them, why on earth did they not even build one school for their own people? You see, that's the difference between the Afrikaner and the other people in this country. We build stuff for ourselves, and then we also build stuff for everyone else. Now, this is what I'm saying has to stop. We can't go on still paying taxes to still make people rich while they're not doing anything for themselves. Now they go out and say, yeah, AfriForum should have helped the black people, and they should have talked about all the black murders as well. if you care so much about it, then do your own thing. Help your own people. Build a school for your own people. Why
So
do
if
you have
45
this whole
million people
complex
had to pay,
of us
sorry,
having to build every school for them? Sorry, you can go on, Renaldo.
okay, if 45 million people had to stop paying VAT right now, how would that impact on South Africa? Because we're all using tax as the example. And listen, I have to say that I am quite shocked at your answer to what you said. The fact that, you know, you are literally saying that, you know, apartheid doesn't have an effect on who and what we are today.
Well, I was born 6 years after apartheid ended, but people still tell me that I am the cause for their problems. My grandparents voted to end apartheid. Now you want to come tell me, oh, you white people are the cause of stuff. So
By the way,
how does that
okay.
affect me?
Okay, yeah, let me tell you, because I am an Afrikaner and I'm the same skin color as you, so I can tell you. We come from the same background. You might be a lot younger than what I am, but I was born, 11 years before apartheid ended. The simple fact of the matter is, like I said, in 1994, 45 million black people didn't suddenly become middle class. The legacy of apartheid left them poor, left them uneducated, left them living in the worst of worst conditions. And the fact that you think that that does not have any bearing on who and what they are today, it's honestly, it's an eye-opener. I mean, this is something, look, I fully understand where you're coming from in being accused, because I'm also being accused, but I'm being accused by people that are racist. So, you know, we can talk about the minority of people that act racist towards us, just like the media likes to portray, you know, AfriForum as an example as a racist organization. I believe that AfriForum is not a racist organization. But my point is that if we're going to fall into that trap of thinking a minority of people, when they call us racist or oppressors, speak on behalf of the majority, then that is something that we definitely need to sort of look at. So, you know, I have to fundamentally disagree with you on the point that apartheid didn't have any sort of effect on who and where we are currently today.
Okay, so why did black people under apartheid have the highest standard of living of all black people on the whole African continent? And why is Ethiopia, who is the only country in the world that was never colonized, or the only country in Africa that was never colonized, why are they not then doing better than Switzerland at this moment? Or are you telling me that there's some kind of magical white privilege that's keeping the Ethiopians down as well? You see, the thing is, Renaldo,
wait, you asked me a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Let me answer. Where did you get that statistic that it was the highest, you know, whatever you said? I've heard that excuse so many times. My question is, what statistic are you basing that on?
That was an article by the Institute of Race Relations.
When? Okay, let's not. Okay, you can provide that to me after the fact, and I'll listen to that. But when I hear that excuse, what I in essence hear is, you know, we treated people very badly in South Africa. Hey, but at least, you know, like for instance, we whipped them only once in South Africa, whereas in the rest of Africa they got whipped twice.
No, in the rest of Africa they didn't get whipped at all because there was no apartheid.
No, but
that's why the rest of Africa is doing so extremely well, because they didn't have the white devils oppressing them like they did in South Africa.
The reason South Africa did so well back in apartheid was because there was a workforce that was forced to work for minimum wage. And when they left the country and they tried to come back to help their family, they were arrested and murdered. That's what happened.
Okay, what example can you give me of something like that ever happening? Because all 518 murders that were committed by the apartheid government that was documented was against known terrorists or suspected terrorists. What other example can you give me?
So here's a question. That's another thing that pops up, is the whole terrorist aspect of things, right? Let's say, for instance, the worst fear that the Freedom Front Plus has, and let's say that a civil war breaks out tomorrow, for example, or let's ignore the civil war. Let's just go that all white people's rights are taken away, and in essence, they are being treated like what black people
which they are doing now, exactly.
No, please, how can you say that? According
119 laws against my skin color.
I was still busy talking. According to our constitution, you have equal rights. White people in this country have equal rights. We've got equal rights to any other race in this country. You are allowed to own property. we're not even going to talk about the property
Not
thing
for
because we
long.
both agree. Well, we both agree that that policy is absolutely ridiculous. So we don't have to debate that. I'm talking about the current state of where we are right now. You cannot tell me that white people in this country have less rights than anybody else, because it's simply not true. And if you want to compare your assumption that we have less rights to what was experienced during apartheid, then that is really problematic, because then I think you don't have an understanding of how black and colored people were treated during apartheid.
Now, of course, I can never have an understanding of exactly how they were treated, because all I can do is look at the facts that history provide to me, because I never lived during that time. But what I can tell you is I can look at what's happening now. I've got 119 laws against my skin color. Before I studied theology, I studied veterinary medicine. Now, as you might know, the veterinary medicine is probably the most difficult course to get into in this country. And I had an average in matric of more than 94%. Well, I'm not trying to brag here, but that's just what happened. And I had to have an average of almost 95% in matric to get into veterinary medicine, while there were people sitting next to me in class, well, they fell out later, but in any case, who had C's in school. Like, if you're black in this country, like, everything's just getting handed to you on a plate. Just get C's in school, get into medicine, go get into engineering, while the white people, there was only 12 people allowed in veterinary medicine because of their skin color, because of the laws that oppress white people in this country. And all you have to do is just get okay marks in school, and then you get everything else handed to you on a silver platter. Like, all those boys I'm talking about and girls that I'm talking about had full scholarships, paying their food and their accommodation and their studies and everything. They were basically living off the state. They just get everything handed to them on a silver platter, while we have 119 laws that prevents us from even achieving. We have to work so much harder to be able to achieve in this country. They don't. They just get it.
So on that point, I studied for 8 years. I obtained 4 degrees, also not trying to brag. I had to pay my own way. I didn't get any scholarships. I didn't get any added benefits to studying. When I applied for my postgrads, I didn't get the same stuff that you are talking about. I had to work 2 jobs to get my degrees. And yet there were black individuals that got in based on scholarships. And the reason for that was because of the color of their skin. You know, the ironic part is, if I have to look at my old videos, the Rendier videos that I used to make, I would have exactly the same argument as what you're having now. The difference that when I realized that what I was saying wasn't completely taking the whole context of the history of our country, is the fact that here's a question that I have for you. Do you have your own car at the moment? That let me ask it this way. Do you think that your path from high school was easier to university than somebody that was that might be black, as it stands on average? On average, not
Definitely
rich,
not.
black,
Like, just look at the guys that studied with me in my first year when I was studying veterinary medicine. I had to pay for everything myself. I didn't get any added benefits. While they got their accommodation, they got their food, they got their studies paid for them. They got enough money as just for per month allowance that they could have buy their own cars. I mean, just denying that would be dumber than anything else.
That's what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, let me be direct with you. Do you not think that you, yeah, this is a question I have, right? And I'm sorry, moderator, if I'm asking the questions now, but we're almost touching an hour. But
no, this conversation is progressing very well, and I think the chat and all the viewers are very entertained. So please go ahead.
Great. I think that if Willem, if you want to extend this a little bit, then we can extend it. I'm happy with that. I think it's a progressive discussion.
Let's do 20 minutes extra.
Yeah, okay. I think that'll be a good decision. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So here's a question that I have for you, right? Do you want to, I'm not going to load it. Let me just ask it straight out. Do you not see yourself as a beneficiary of white privilege?
Definitely not. I mean, I don't come from a rich family. My parents worked for what they got. My grandparents worked so hard for what they got. They came out of the Second World War. They had nothing. They had to build everything up from the ground. My parents didn't grow up rich. I didn't grow up rich. I worked for everything that I got. I've got a job selling insurance. I had a job selling insurance. I've got a job now. I'm doing that just to keep alive. I don't usually I've got this book here that people did for me on my channel that I should read, Western Empires. So I want to read these books, but I didn't even have enough money to buy that book. So I had to wait until I got the next month's money just to buy a book. So how can you say I'm privileged? I mean, then
Okay.
and then right next to me, there's this black guy that just gets everything handed to him for like on a silver platter.
So okay, let me ask this then, and I'm getting to a point, and it's not a trap. I'm literally just trying to get to the point. When you said you had to start over, or your parents had to start over, or grandparents rather, what job did your let me ask this: what job did your mom and dad have? What did they do for a living, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, my mom never worked, and my dad is a nuclear engineer.
Okay, so your dad had to study to become a nuclear engineer.
Yeah,
Where did he so what year did he study in roughly? What year roughly did your father study in?
85.
Could a black individual study the same thing at exactly the same time as your father?
Yes, look at Mandela. He had a degree that he studied for while he was in prison. So even a black convict could study for a degree, and the black people of the street could also do it. They were, I think, yeah, in university specifically for black people. They were the best medicine university in the world, the Medusa. At that stage, or not the best in the world, it was the one that had the best facilities in the world at the stage that it was built for black people. Saying they didn't have the opportunity to do that would just be an outright lie.
But okay, my last question is then, would he be able to get a job in 1985 as in that position in South Africa?
Well, obviously, my dad didn't get the job in 1985 as he was studying in 1985.
Okay, so
But to know what jobs he would have gotten, that I think this is a bit too theoretical for me. But
no, well,
just saying that he wouldn't would also be just as big as a lie as him.
Based on South African law back then, he would not have gotten the job. So he would have to have gone, let's say if he was educated, let's say at Fort Hare, he was able to get that degree, which I doubt that they offered, because they only offered it at certain universities that only white people could attend. So let's say that in 1989, as an example, I know it doesn't take 4 years, but let's, for argument's sake, say it was 89. He would not be able to do that job, which means that he would have to take a job that is below himself in order to sustain him and his family. That in itself means that your family has been more privileged because your dad was afforded the opportunity to do the job that he wanted to do because of his skin color. And if you can't see that in itself is a privilege, in order to afford you the opportunity to go and study because of your dad not being restricted at what he could do. So I understand that you worked for everything. I'm not disputing that fact. I completely look, whenever you say that somebody is privileged, it doesn't mean that they didn't have to work for that. It doesn't mean that I'm taking anything away from what you've achieved. What I'm saying is that your path to being able to be where you are currently was a lot less hampered than somebody that is a black individual or colored individual. I'm not trying that's what my point. My point is I'm not insulting you and saying that you didn't achieve anything. I'm saying that a black individual in exactly the same position as you probably had a lot more obstacles in their way. That is the point that I'm trying to make.
Right, Willem, you have an opportunity to
Okay,
answer his question, and then you can ask your question as well.
I just want to say that saying that black people didn't have the opportunity to study at the university where my dad did is an outright lie, because I know that one of my dad's best friends is a veterinarian, and he actually started studying in 1980. And in 1980, with him studying veterinary medicine with him at the University of Pretoria, where my dad studied, there were black people, there were colored people, and there were Indian people as well. I mean, one of his friends studied with him is a black guy who is now a state vet there in the Mpumalanga province. So just all these things, it sounds like things Malema would say. No, they didn't have the opportunity to study at Tux or whatever, which is an outright lie, because I can literally go take you to that guy's house and let you meet him, the guy that studied in 1980 at the University of Pretoria.
Okay, so then look, what I did, the point that I was trying to make with your father is the fact that, you know, it was lucky to be 1985, but if the scenario was, let's say, 1975 or 1965, that opportunity would not have existed. So I'll give it to you that in 1985, things might have been different, but it doesn't change the fact that before that, you remember apartheid lasted well over 40 years. So, you know, that is 2 to 3 generations. That's my point. My point is that you can't oppress 1 or 2 generations and expect the next generation to magically recover from an oppressive regime that was there for 45 years, unfortunately. People in 1994 didn't magically become middle class or educated in order to just pick up a job. Majority of them had to stay as petrol attendants, had to stay as domestic workers because they didn't have the education, and that impacted on their next generation, on their children, which had to provide for the family.
Renaldo, we are almost approaching the same time now after apartheid ended than the total time apartheid existed. From 1948 to 1990, it officially existed. That's 32 years. Now, after apartheid ended 1990 until now, or you can take it from 1994 because that's when the election took place, but when apartheid was officially abolished was 1990. But let's take it from 1994. Then
it's 42 years.
We know it is
32. It's 42.
20. Sorry about that. Any case, yeah, that was just a bit of a mistake that I made then. But in any case, so we are approaching about 30 years now after the end of apartheid. Well, how much more time do you want to give people to actually be able to enact more than 100 laws against me for my skin color, just because some time ago, when my grandparents were still, before my dad even started to work, they were not given the same opportunities, as you say. How much longer must we deliberately oppress another person just because of that?
I'll be honest with you, I don't have an answer, because I do think the ANC is absolutely failing this country. Affirmative action and black economic empowerment wasn't implemented correctly. It's a system that's completely broken, and that is where I would fully agree with you that the system is completely and utterly in shambles. I think that it is a policy, and I mean, when listening to you now, I mean, those are views that I had about 10 years ago. Those are views that I exactly felt the same way about as you. I'm not here to answer on behalf of the ANC, because I think the ANC is an absolute corrupt system. I believe that the EFF is an absolute corrupt system, and I personally take the insult that I am very similar to Malema personally, and I'm just joking, but Malema is probably one of the people that I dislike the most in this country. Because of the racial politics that he's playing and the way that he is trying to play this game, which can end very dangerously for a lot of people in this country. So to be honest with you, I don't have an answer, because I'm not here to speak on behalf of the ANC. Is it a failed system? Yes, fully and utterly agree with you. Is it a system that was needed after 1994? I fully agree with that. It was a system in order to right the wrongs of the past. Whether or not you should pay for it, whether or not my children should pay for it one day, or even if I should pay for it, that is something that I can't answer, but it's something that was needed at the time. So, yeah.
Okay, but at this time now, can you at least agree that we can move in the direction of something like the canton system in Switzerland, where we stop living off each other's money and we start looking after our own?
The thing is, I see South Africa as a multicultural society. So let me say this, which is something I don't think we're going to have time for, so I want to push it in now. If people feel the need that they want to go and live on their own, as a centrist, I don't have a problem with that, because I believe that you are entitled to live the way that you want to live. If you want to live in a closed little bubble and I'm not insulting, I'm just saying, if you want to live in your own little bubble with your own little culture, and you don't want to mix and interact with people from other cultures, then as much as I think that it's a backwards type of thinking, I believe that you should have the right to do that. Whether or not I think that you should get a tax break because of that, I don't honestly, I can't pass comment, but I don't see how you can expect to live in South Africa, which is a democratic country, and think that you can get away with not having to pay your taxes. Noting, as I've stated in this argument how many times before, that it is not only tax that pays for people in this country. VAT plays an important part too. 15% of everything that is bought in this country is paid back to the tax man. And unfortunately, 50, how many are we now? 54 million people in this country have to pay VAT. So let's move away from the tax issue, because everybody's paying VAT, and I think that makes up the majority of where the money comes from.
So we can abolish tax, income tax fully then, like they did or like America was until the socialists got so prominent in the 30s when they introduced taxes there.
No, me promoting one thing doesn't mean I'm automatically against another thing. Tax is needed. I pay quite a considerable amount of tax money, and I know my taxes are being wasted. I'm not sitting here going that my tax money is being spent. The ANC is absolutely corrupt. 1 trillion rand lost since 1994. It is absolutely shocking. It is something that is ridiculous, and it's something that shocks me to my core when we go to the polls and the ANC still retains being the government of this country. So whether or not our tax money is being utilized or not, I fully agree with you there that our taxes aren't being spent where it should be. Whether or not we should stop paying taxes, I don't think that's the answer.
All right, I think we can wrap this up now and both just give our closing statements. Or would you agree, Renaldo?
No, that's fine. We can always have another debate if people want more in the future.
All right. I think you can go ahead with your closing statements then.
Okay, I'll afford you the last word on it, which is obviously always the best one to have. So what I've seen from this debate, I think that you and I aren't far apart when it comes to certain elements, right? I think that you and I would agree that the ANC is corrupt. You and I would agree that the EFF is an absolute cancer to South Africa. Where I would disagree with you is I think that you don't understand how severe apartheid was, not only for Black people in this country, but how it affected us in modern day South Africa. I think it's important that you perhaps, as much as you read books, for instance, the latest one being Kill the Boer, which I definitely will read, because as a centrist, I like to know what my opposition thinks. I like to know, what the other side of my beliefs believes in. But with that being said, I would also highly recommend that you perhaps just do a little bit more research and understand the impact that apartheid had on this country, and not just listen to what like-minded people that you agree with have to say on the topic, because that is how I was 10 years ago. I was very narrow-minded in my beliefs, and I'm not trying to insinuate that you're narrow-minded, because we had a very good discussion. I personally was very narrow-minded in saying, yes, but what about this and what about that? And, we're already 24 years into a new South Africa, and yet nothing has changed. Unfortunately, I had to open my mind up and actually go and understand and basically walk in somebody else's shoes to understand. So if I would give you a tip in my closing argument, it would be to maybe put yourself in a Black individual's shoes and maybe just have a discussion. Maybe just drive in a township, in any township in South Africa, because, it made the news that, there's one white township, but yet people miraculously leave the other Black townships that are in the thousands around South Africa. It shows you how privileged white people are in this country, when we can show one white township and people loses their minds, but magically we ignore the other thousands of Black townships around this country. So yeah, in conclusion, thank you so much for the debate. I really did enjoy it. But I would say that your comments on the legacy of apartheid for me is very, very problematic, and shows for me that you don't understand the full effect of what apartheid has caused and the legacy thereof today. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Renaldo. as you guys can probably see, we just had a power outage here, but luckily I'm on my laptop, so I still got power there.
Oh, wow, wow.
In any case, you said I don't understand how severe apartheid was. Now, the thing for me is, what I think is, I don't, um, I don't connect emotion to the argument of apartheid. I just look at the facts of the books that I read, and I really read a lot of books. I read probably about three or four, yeah, maybe three or four, five, even five books a week, or I mean, sorry, the bell just went on again. Any case, and I don't just read books about people that I do agree with. I mean, I read Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. I read Das Kapital by Karl Marx. I read some absolutely despicable books in my own view, and I take the argument that I see is the best argument, and that argument was the one that was put forth by Andrew Breitbart. He's definitely my favorite author of all time, and what he said essentially was that what Marxists do, and or the socialists or whatever you want to call them, they go to a society and they identify who the losers are and who the winners are. And the losers are 98% of the population, and the winners are the other 2% of the population. Then they push propaganda to make the 98% believe that the 2% owes them something just because the 2% has more than they have. And unluckily, Andrew Breitbart died at a very young age of just over 40 of a very questionable heart disease causes. But luckily nowadays there are other people that took up the flame of his intellect, like Jordan Peterson, for example, Stefan Molyneux. These people, I watch these people, and they are the ones that form my opinion, of course, because I agree with them. But I also watch the Young Turks, and I also read the Huffington Post and stuff like that. It's just I try to weigh the arguments of for one Stefan Molyneux against someone like the Young Turks, and it's just like Stefan Molyneux makes so much more sense. And that's where my opinion comes from, and it's in international eyes that I'm looking at now, like people like Andrew Breitbart wrote. But the exact same arguments that we see in America, in Canada, all over Europe, are the exact same ones that the socialists use here in South Africa. There's no difference, and that's why I believe like I do believe. And I don't believe that I am narrow-minded. I think I read enough of books and watch enough videos of all viewpoints to form an opinion from both sides. But in any case, that's all statements that I do have. I just want to finish off by telling you guys to go please check out my pinned tweets. I've actually got a girl that wants to start making videos the way that I do, and I'm going to mentor her to do so. Very, very nice looking girl. So go check out what I talked about in my pinned tweet, and I'll be having her on my live show on Tuesday, and I hope to see you guys there. Then you can meet her and ask her a few questions. So any case, goodbye you guys, and thank you very much, Renaldo, for coming on my show.
Only a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, Caracal, for helping to moderate the debate.
Absolutely no problem, man. I look forward to the next one. I think there's a lot still to be discussed.
Definitely. All right. Goodbye, guys, and have a good night.